안녕하세요. 하이파이 클럽 한창원입니다. 제가 이렇게 또 멋진 공간에 와 있습니다. 여기는 독일의 괴벨 스피커 본사에 있는 시청실이거든요. 여기서 옆에 계신 올리버 괴벨 씨와 인터뷰를 하게 됐는데요. 옆에 보이시는 이 스피커가 이번에 새로 나온 스피커라고 합니다. 모나크라는 스피커거든요. 그래서 오늘 이 공장 탐방도 다 하고 음악도 들어봤는데 글쎄요. 제가 여태껏 다녀봤던 어떤 오디오 리스닝룸 기준에서 가장 최고의 사운드를 들었다고 얘기해도 좋을 만큼 정말 뛰어난 사운드를 들어볼 수 있는 소중한 경험을 했던 그런 시간이었습니다. 그럼 지금부터 옆에 올리버 괴벨 씨와 인터뷰를 나눠보도록 하겠습니다. Hello.
Hello.
How are you?
Good. Nice to meet you. Nice to have you here.
Yeah. 자, 오늘 저희를 이렇게 초대해 주시고 이렇게 멋진 공간에서 음악을 들을 수 있는 기회를 주셔서 대단히 감사합니다.
You're more than welcome. It was my pleasure.
이제 에포크 시리즈가 있고 이제 디빈 시리즈가 있고 두 시리즈의 공통점을 이야기해 보라 그러면은 일반적인 디자인이 아니라 그 에포크 시리즈는 굉장히 슬림하게 생겼고 또 이제 디빈 시리즈는 굉장히 좀 거대한 사이즈를 하고 있는데 어떤 그렇게 디자인 컨셉을 그렇게 가져가시는 건지 아니면 최고의 사운드를 구현해내기 위해서 그 만들어진 결과물의 디자인인지가 궁금합니다.
The reason is the last one. So for the Epoch Eon series, because of the radiation pattern of this bending wave driver, it has a very wide dispersion range over the whole frequency range. We need the enclosure to be as small as possible to add up with this dispersion. In the Divin series, it's different because we have it only radiates to the front, and also with a different pattern than the Epoch Eon series, not so wide. Also, very constantly. This is also one development I'm looking to reach, to have a very constant dispersion range, not something like the mid-range is beaming and then all of a sudden the tweeter takes over and makes something else. So it's a very constant equal dispersion between all of them. But yeah, it's everything also on the Epoch Eon series as well as on the Divin series is form follows function. It's purely this way. So the sizes, the front baffle, the facets on the front and so on. It's the waveguide. So that it all has acoustic reason for it.
자, 그럼 이제 옆에 있죠. 이번에 새롭게 출시된 이 모나크라는 모델의 스피커에 대해서 좀 얘기를 해보겠는데요. 이 스피커가 이제 마제스티 그리고 노블레스 그 사이에 어떤 포지셔닝된 스피커인데 이 모나크 스피커에 대해서 물어보기 전에 이 디빈 시리즈 스피커를 들으면서 제가 이제 늘 사람들한테 하는 얘기가 있는데 덩치는 굉장히 큰데 내주는 소리는 어떻게 들어보면 여성적이다라는 느낌이 들 정도로 굉장히 그 섬세한 사운드를 내주는 그런 느낌을 받을 때가 있거든요. 그러니까 보통 이제 이렇게 큰 스피커 하면은 큰 스피커들이 주는 어떤 나쁜 버릇들이 좀 있는 경우가 있거든요. 모든 음악을 너무 큰 스케일로 막 이렇게 내준다든가 그런 어떤 나쁜 성향 없이 정말 음악에 있는 소리를 아주 작고 섬세한 소리는 아주 섬세하게 그리고 거대한 스케일은 또 굉장히 크게 내주는 그런 능력이 굉장히 뛰어나다는 생각을 하는데 제작자로서 그 부분을 진짜 신경 써서 그렇게 만든 것인지 그런 부분에 대해서 그 올리버 괴벨 씨는 어떻게 생각하시는지 한번 그 말씀을 들어보고 싶습니다.
That's a good observation and question. This is only a natural result of the phase and time coherent possibility of reproducing the music. What you said is right, that many big speakers sound like big, so every instrument is like, even if it should be like this size. This is because of many reasons, but the main reason is they are lacking the coherence between the drivers. So that blows up the sound stage or the instruments, even if it should be small. And by again using the bending wave technology on the mid-range and perfectionize the phase and time response of the driver and the connection then between them creates this, that you have small things sound small as they should, big things when they should sound big, they are sounding big, and that's the reason for it.
네, 그러면 이제 이 모나크 이 스피커에 대해서 설명을 좀 부탁드리겠습니다.
With pleasure. So the Divin Monarch is now, like you said, the new model in our lineup, Divin lineup. A smaller Divin Majestic, not a bigger Divin Noblesse. So we are using nearly all technologies we are using in the Majestic, we are also using in the Monarch, which is starting from the visual thing that we have a black matte front, which is fully aluminum. But it's not the front baffle is not only aluminum. It's a multi-layered constraint layer design. Inside, it's the aluminum is only on the top. So width or the total thickness of the front baffle is 105 millimeters. So it's very massive and decoupled between each other. So is the same technology we use in the Majestic. Also, the whole enclosure is a constraint layer design, which again is the same like in the Majestic. The differences between the Majestic and the Monarch is that in the Monarch we are using 15-inch woofers instead of 18-inch woofers in the Majestic. This results in a little bit lower sensitivity. Another visually difference is that the Monarch is a one-speaker construction. So the Majestic is consisting each speaker out of 3 parts, which has to be stacked together, which has positive effects when you isolate again these 3 parts. But here it is in one part. This is actually the main difference between them. All the other technologies with the bending wave enhanced mid-range driver, with a usage of internal Helmholtz resonators in the bus cabinet to control resonances in the cabinet, with a front-ported symmetrical design. It's all the same technologies like in the Majestic, only made them a little bit smaller in appearance of the speaker, to fit in smaller rooms like the Majestic. Majestic is very big. To stack them, to stack the 3 pieces, you need a very high ceiling, a big room for this. So here you can have the speakers in smaller rooms. Actually, this is always our approach. All our Divin speakers are actually reference speakers. We don't have an entry model, so to say. The small model, the Comtesse, uses exactly the same mid-range driver as the Majestic or the Monarch. The sound reproduction is very similar. It only always depends on the room size. If you have a small room, the Majestic isn't the right choice for it, so you need a smaller speaker. But the smaller speaker should also perform at its best. So that's the whole philosophy of the Divin series. That every speaker is a reference speaker, only depending on the application, on the room size from the client.
아까 잠깐 말씀드렸지만 저희가 이제 인터뷰하기 전에 여기 그 개별 그 시청실이 큰 게 하나 있고 작은 게 하나 있어서 큰 거는 이제 마제스티의 뒤에 서브우퍼까지 별도로 해갖고 정말 거대한 그 시스템을 들었고요. 그 다음에 여기 있는 이제 모나크는 여기 보면 이 리비에라 앰프죠. 리비에라 앰프로 상대적으로 규모가 적긴 하지만 물론 여기도 엄청난 하이엔드 시스템이죠. 아무튼 거기서 2 군데에서 음악을 듣는데 정말로 제가 솔직하게 말씀드리면 제 자신이 겸손해질 정도로 정말 뛰어난 사운드를 들었고, 그래서 제 개인적으로 아, 올리버 궤벨이라는 사람이 추구하는 사운드가 이런 거였구나 라는 거를 저도 느꼈는데, 그래도 또 본인이 생각하는 하이엔드 오디오의 사운드는 무엇이고, 내가 추구하는 소리, 그리고 내가 이 스피커로 만들어내고자 하는 그 최종적인 결과물, 그런 부분에 대해서 한번 질문을 드려보고 싶습니다.
Actually, it's a very easy answer. I want to reproduce as natural as possible the music. So if you can, at the best, you can judge this with real instruments. Of course, it depends on the recording, on everything up front. But to reproduce the music so you get emotionally affected by it, to think really this instrument or this artist is in the room. So that's, everybody says this, but this is actually the ultimate goal, to have this real connection to the music. This is what I'm looking for. Not impulse response, resolution, whatever. These are only part effects of the whole picture. It should sound as natural as possible. This is the ultimate goal, to make the music reproduction as natural as possible. And all technologies you're using and all development you're doing is only to reach this goal at the end, because you want to listen. You're listening with your ears, and you want to listen to something that sounds like real. Every measurement you're doing up front, which are very important, measurements are very important. Every measurements you're doing are only to monitor small parts of the whole picture, and to make them more perfect, or to research more to get them more perfect.
지금 이 궤벨 스피커라는 이 회사를 설립한 지는 얼마나 되신 거죠?
It's I founded my company 2003, 23 years ago.
그리고 지금 이 건물을 지으신 지 한 4년 정도 됐다고 그러셨는데, 그러면 그 이전에는 어디서 이렇게 그 스피커 제작을 하고 그렇게 하셨는지요?
Before we were renting. I started 2003 in a small town in the west of Munich. We started there in a agriculture building. Actually, before it was used already for machinery shops, and we rented there. And we over the time we always need more space. And around 7 years ago, it was clear that we can't expand there anymore. So I was starting looking at other venues to relocate. But after some time, I found out that actually no venue to rent was made for our needs, was equipped for our needs. So I thought and decided to build our own headquarter, and to construct everything so it perfectly fits our needs, with the right listening rooms, the full anechoic chamber in the production line, with anything. So it's easy and without any hassle to produce, and concentrate only on the main thing. What we are doing, this is development and production of loudspeakers.
이제 제가 알고 있기로 그 이 궤벨 스피커 하시기 전에 지멘스라는 회사에서도 근무를 하셨던 걸로 알고 있고, 거기서 이미 밴딩 웨이브 기술을 거기서 개발하신 걸로 알고 있는데, 그런 지멘스라는 회사를 다니시다가 이렇게 독립해서 이 궤벨 하이엔드라는 스피커 제조사를 그 차린 계기, 그 이유가 좀 궁금합니다.
Yes, you're right. I was working at Siemens, and actually the bending wave technology is nothing I invented or somebody else invented lately. It's old technology. Actually, every classic instrument is using this principle to reproduce sound. string instruments, also the body of a violin or the resonance plate in a piano, everything is actually resonating and producing over this resonance mode, over bending wave, the sound pressure differences which we are hearing as a tone, as a sound. So that's nothing new for this, but to use this principle very broadband for broadband wideband speaker. This was new in a high-end quality. Before it was used for effects or for noise cancelling or something like this. At Siemens we were looking into this technology beside other things because it was an audio division within Siemens. And we also were looking into this bending wave, and this was where felt in love with this principle and the possibilities it offers. And we researched, but the applications were only for bigger markets. So they were not chasing for the highest end quality. They were chasing more for usable applications where they can multiply their investments and their developments. And they use DSP technology to control the resonances and so on. Way of thinking, because I was since ever in the high-end audiophile, I was always in music reproduction. Short story: my family is very music affine, so they are playing a lot of instruments from organ to piano to trumpets to violin. I was also forced to learn violin. So the connection there to music instruments is I was very heavily affected by this, but I was never the artist in playing instruments. My interest was in the perfect replication of the music, and that's why I went into audiophile or audio applications, and this was my interest since I'm a little boy. Coming back to Siemens, so my approach was more to make the principle from the outset more perfect, so mechanically, to not use any type of surface to reproduce any sound and try to cure these diseases with the DSP. It's more from the beginning to have the most perfect beginning. So you don't need a DSP or anything else. So that was my approach, and there's much more research in doing this and find the right material properties, sizes, damping behavior, whatever, to result in a perfect, or perfect doesn't exist, to the best possible outcome from also mechanically already. And that was my approach. And I couldn't do this, so I thought I will do it by my own. So I quit at Siemens and started the company Göbel High-End with a reason to use bending wave technology to reproduce, in order to use bending wave technology in loudspeakers to reproduce the music in the best possible way, in the most natural way. So that's the reason for Göbel High-End.
그럼 좀 더 구체적으로 사실 göbel 하이엔드 스피커 하면은 이제 밴딩 웨이브 기술을 빼놓을 수가 없잖아요. 이 밴딩 웨이브 기술에 대해서 좀 더 구체적으로 좀 설명을 해주시고, 이 밴딩 웨이브 기술이 이렇게 하이엔드 스피커에 어떻게 적용이 됐는지 그 부분을 좀 설명 부탁드리겠습니다.
To illustrate the functional principle of a bending wave speaker, it's not correct, but you can easily visualize it. When you throw a stone in the water, there will appear waves on the surface, and this is actually how a bending wave speaker creates also the sound. So it's actuated and waves are running over the surface. And everything you are hearing are only pressure differences in the air. And the time difference between the pressure differences are the frequency. So if this pressure difference is 1,000 times a second, you hear 1,000 hertz tone of 1,000 hertz tone. The same is with a bending wave. Actually, it's a multi-resonance plate, which is going into resonance. As one difficult part is to have it resonate over the whole frequency range simultaneously the same, equal. So deeper frequencies and a higher frequency should resonate the same. Additionally, the difficulty is to dampen then instantly this energy away from the surface. So when the music stops, there's no music anymore. So coming out. So that's the difficult part on a bending wave speaker. Let me explain a little bit different. A piston speaker, for example, to produce this sound pressure difference, 1,000 hertz again has to go forth to back 1,000 times in a second to reproduce this sound pressure difference. A bending wave speaker does it differently. A wave is running over the surface or is bending the surface, the material. And you have also the high pressure and then the low pressure, which radiates and will produce the sound. And in a resonance mode, this wave is running faster on the surface. The velocity is faster than in air. That's why it gets detached from the surface. We don't use only this technology in our bending wave speaker series. There we use it on purpose. So there's a wideband speaker from 160 hertz to 30,000 hertz with this one driver, with this bending wave driver. We also use this technology in our Divin series, which is actually looking more like a conventional speaker. But we use there this technology or this knowledge to prevent resonances. And in the bending wave speaker, we want to use this as a broadband resonator to reproduce the sound. And here we don't want resonances on the membrane, on the surround, on the dust cap. We don't want it. We only want the speaker moving forth to back and without resonating. And there we use our technology to control these resonances with special material mixtures of the membrane, with the cone geometry, with the dust cap where it's glued. The surround, it's also special textile surround with the coatings. So there are a lot of parts where we apply our technology and thinking and developments to avoid resonances. Or you can't really avoid resonances, but everything is resonance. So what we are doing is we don't want high Q resonances like on a hard metal membrane or on metal or glass when you knock it, it makes wing. So this is what you don't want to have. High energy over a long time, that is what you don't want to have. And this you can't control. So you have to spread that. There's what this multi-resonance mode bending wave speaker kicks in. You want to spread this resonance, the single resonances in a very broad band resonance, which is very low in level and energy, and this you can control and try to suck away. This you can't suck away. So that's a mess. Not only on the frequency, also on the timing, which comes then to the phase and which creates other problems. So to avoid these, we use the bending wave technology.
제가 이제 궤벨 스피커를 들으면서 늘 느끼는 것은 분명히 트위터, 미드레인지, 우퍼 이런 일반적인 조합인데 다른 어떤 스피커보다 그걸 대역간 이음새라고 그럴까요? 하나의 풀레인지 유닛에서 나오는 것 같은 그런 어떤 자연스러운 대역간의 이음새를 느끼고는 하는데 그게 말씀하신 그 밴딩 웨이브 기술 때문인가요?
Yes, also, yeah. Before, like I started to explain with the phase and problems, if you have resonances on the membrane, it affects also the phase and the timing. And for example, our mid-range driver, we try to have as the working window of this driver is very, very big, with also not only in the frequency range, but also with the phase, with the acoustic phase, so we can blend the speakers perfectly together. Otherwise, you have some phase issues with one driver, and then it falls apart. There's no real connection between the drivers, and this is the main thing, is that we use this bending wave knowledge on the mid-range driver, but also positioning of the speakers to each other in the depth or in all three dimensions. Also a part of it, and also the enclosure, this hourglass shape has a purpose to minimize side reflections, and so there's a few things that result then in this effect. I'm happy that you are hearing this like this, but this is many things add up together to combine this result in, because this is also one of the main things, is to have, like you said, like a wideband full range speaker, not bass, mid-range, tweeter, and so on. So to have it blended so perfectly together, and even if you're sitting very close, you don't need to sit far away. You can sit 1 meter away actually, and it still feels like it's a full range speaker, and not many ways. Even that the speaker here is so big. Yeah.
2003년도에 회사를 설립했다 그러면 20대 때 회사를 차리신 건데, 사실 이제 제 개인적으로 기준으로 보면 스피커를 만드는 거는 굉장히 어려운 기술이라고 생각을 하는데, 어떻게 20대 때 내가 원하는 소리를 만들기 위해서 하이엔드 오디오용 스피커를 만들어 봐야겠다라고 생각하게 되셨는지.
That's a good question. Yeah, like I said, I started very early. When I was a small boy, I took apart. But this is, I think, for many people in this industry, a common story, that I took apart a lot of loudspeakers and amplifiers to see what's inside and to understand why it's working. So that was, from the beginning, my interest was always speakers, not amplifiers, not source components. My main focus was always on speakers. Maybe why I founded it is, as I was always in this area working with, I also developed speakers and sold them to friends. But this is also maybe a common story with some others who are in this business. For me, it was always building for me the best possible. That was always actually the reason for doing this. It was, I was curious, when I apply this, I learned something else. What if I apply this then to this and this? So it was always my interests, and to get the best possible product for me, for my personal use. And then I started selling these products to friends and friends of this friends, and so that's actually how it started. And then I was working in bigger companies and had then the possibility to have access to better research instruments and to more knowledge. And at some point, I was not happy with in which direction this went. For example, with Siemens, more in the mass market. I wanted to perfectionize things, not multiply it for the masses. So to make it cheap, producible. So maybe this was then the reason that I thought, now I have to go by my own and use my knowledge to further develop and build speakers. And that's still, until now, all products I built, or the Majestic or the new Monarch, is actually first for my pleasure, to finish a new product and a new a new task, and to be happy with it, and then I offer this also to others. So that's actually what drives me is I want to do it for me.
자, 이제 마지막 질문이 될 것 같은데요. 디빈 마제스틱이라는 이제 플래그십 스피커도 만드셨고, 그 다음에 모나크라는 스피커도 있고, 그러면 이제 올리버 기벤 씨가 생각하는 최종 목표랄까? 최고의 사운드를 위한 스피커의 모습은 어떤 모습일까요?
Like the Majestic or the Monarch. In my opinion, in nature there's the best. So it's always to find the best possible balance between everything. For me, the Divin Majestic is the absolute maximum, and the Divin Monarch. So that's for me the ideal loudspeaker.
이건 아주 사적인 질문인데요. 개인적으로 그러면 지금 에포크 시리즈하고 디빈 시리즈 두 개가 있잖아요. 그럼 개인적으로 두 시리즈 중에 더 선호하시는 스피커가 있으십니까?
It's hard to say. It's like a father with two children. So, to say I like this one and this. I like them both. Both have their advantages. For the broader audience, the Divin series is most likely the better speaker. For some audio connoisseurs, the Epoch Eon series will be more the most ideal loudspeaker. So it's for me not easy to answer this question.
제 생각엔 저도 이제 두 가지를 다 들어보니까 어떤 오디오적인 재미를 추구하기에는 이포크 시리즈가 더 재밌는 것 같고, 좀 더 자연스럽고 어떤 음악적인 느낌으로 다가오는 거는 디빈 시리즈라 생각을 하는데 어떻게 생각하십니까?
I see the difference actually in the maximum sound pressure level which you can produce. So the Divin series, because of the high sensitivity and the bigger drivers in the bass, can produce a higher sound pressure level, and especially, for example, for symphonic orchestras, which have huge dynamics when all the instruments are playing all together. It's a big benefit for the Divin series. So that for me, actually, this is one of the benefits of the Divin series. Also, the Divin series is a little bit more direct in sound, which has its possible sides. So these are the two main differences. Like I said before, I try to make the Divin series as coherent as possible, so they are also sounding like a full range speaker and not like a three-way system, to mirror this what the Epoch Eon series can offer, because it's a full range speaker from the outset. So so they are in this direct very similar in this. I would say these two differences differs these two speaker lines. Beside the optic, so because visually it's of course totally different.
Yeah.
So the Divin series is more, and the Epoch Eon series is thin, small, and petite from the appearance. Yeah. I would only add one thing, that is the reliability. It's also a very important issue for speakers or audio systems in high-end audio. So our speakers are developed because only one example. We use very big voice coils with inside-outside wiring of the voice coil, which is very uncommon in high-end audio. In order to stabilize or have a very good heat management of the driver. Because when the temperature, when music is playing, the voice coil will get hotter, and this temperature rise will also affect the TILE small parameter of the driver, so how it's reacting to the signal. You have in front a crossover, which is adjusted to the normal working area, the temperature of the driver. So if this driver is changing its values because of the heat, of the temperature, the sound will sound different. The sound that this driver produces. So one goal for the development of a driver is to have a very, very, very good heat management. And this is done by inside-outside wiring. So the voice coil is winded inside of the coil and outside of the coil. So through this, normally it always only outside in double layers or 3 layers, whatever. So doing this on both sides, you have the double of the surface area, which can dissipate heat. Also, if it's bigger, you can have more surface area to dissipate heat. The downside is you have to control then the moving mass, but this is also manageable. But what I wanted to say is this heat management is also a big part of the reliability, because a driver gets damaged when the heat is the heat is too high. So the glue will remove and then it's damaged, it's destroyed. Through our technology, like I said, with a bigger voice coil and inside-outside wirings, we tackle this issue because we want to have the perfect sound. But also this affects the reliability, that it's much more reliable than conventional speakers. So this is also, for me, very important to tell the people, because we are so special. Some were maybe thinking, and maybe the reliability is not so good, and so no. The reliability is even better than normal conventional speaker designs because of the better sound we put, or the research we put into the drivers. If you own a Goebel high-end speaker, you should own it for a long time. Maybe give it to your children, so it shouldn't get destroyed. That's also a very important part for our speaker design.
네, 아무튼 이렇게 초대해 주셔서 너무 감사드리고, 또 이렇게 촬영 협조해 주셔서 감사드리고, 마지막으로 하시고 싶은 말씀 있으시면 부탁드리겠습니다.
The last thing is I want to thank you for visiting us here in Landshut, and for taking your time, doing this wonderful interview and visiting us here and looking through our venue. I really appreciated it, and I hope we see us soon again, maybe in Seoul.
Yeah.
Yeah?
Okay.
Many thanks.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
자, 지금까지 이 독일에 있는 게벨 하이엔드 이 본사에서 올리버 게벨 씨와 이야기를 나눠봤습니다. 긴 시간 시청해 주셔서 대단히 감사합니다. 고맙습니다.